All right, this is the Algebra 2 Unit 2 Lesson 1 video. This entire unit is going to be all about linear equations, linear functions, linear inequalities. And so we're kind of going to start with just some basic ideas of what those are. So in general, linear refers to equations or graphs that graph as a straight line, right? So this means that there is just a constant relationship between x and y. When x changes, y changes the same amount every time. And so the way these end up looking is one of two ways. You have what we call the standard form. That's called the standard form equation. And you have probably what you're more familiar with, which is what we call the slope-intercept form. So we are in this first lesson going to focus on the standard form equation. What they're going to be giving us is they're going to be giving us an equation for a value for x, an equation for a value for y. And the goal here is to take that information, those equations, and create from them a relationship between x and y. So what I mean by that is, like, we might have an equation like this, 4x minus 5 equals 2. It's, like I said, an equation for x. And then on the other side, we're going to have an equation for y. I'm actually going to grab this and move it. There we go. And then we might have an equation for y like this, 2y plus 1 equals negative 4. And so they want us to basically combine these two so that they end up in the standard form. Oops. And so the way we're going to do that is we're going to do kind of like a little just like algebra trick where we are going to make these two equations equal the same thing. And once we do that, we can put them together. So here's what I mean by that. And this is what you're going to be doing on the lesson. We want to take each equation and we want to make them equal 0. That's the goal. So all that means is that we have to get rid of everything on this side of the equation and move it over to the other side. So to do that, on this equation, I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. And I end up with 4x minus 7 equals 0. Over here, I'm going to add 4. All I'm doing is I'm clearing out this side of the equation. 2y plus 5 equals 0. So now that we have two equations that equal 0, we know, based on the properties of algebra, that those two equations equal each other. Because if this equals 0 and this equals 0, then they must also equal each other. That's just kind of common sense, but it's also a property called the transitive property of equality. So we can, in a sense, combine these to say the following. 4x minus 7, which equals 0, also equals 2y plus 5, which equals 0. So now we've said, because they both equal 0, they must equal each other. And then the final kind of step in this process is to take that and then make it look like this equation down here. So we want this to look like this, like the ax plus bx equals c equation. So we're going to move my x and my y over here, and then we're going to move the c, in other words, all the constant terms, to the other side. So we're going to subtract 2y, and I end up with 4x minus 2y minus 7 equals 5, because these cancel out. Next step is to add 7 so that all my constants are on the other side. Let's move this guy down again. And then we're left with 4x minus 2y, that canceled out, equals 12. And so that would be the final equation. And so that's what they're asking us to do here in number 6, number 7, and then we'll talk about 8 and 9 here in a second. But basically, you need to take each one of these equations, set it equal to 0, and find the one that matches. Which one of these is the correct version of this once it is set equal to 0? Same thing with this one, set it equal to 0. Then write them out like I did here, where I combined them, and then solve that until it is in standard form. Again, this is the goal here, is standard form. Once it's in standard form, that's your final answer for the combined equation. So again, the steps of the process are set each equation equal to 0, combine them, solve for standard form. All right? So that's what we're doing. Here we've done, this is the step of set each equation equal to 0. Then we've combined those equations into one equation, and then we've solved that equation for standard form. And that's what you're doing on these. Similar process when you're dealing with inequalities. Just hop over here. Not much different. So let's say I had the following. I'm going to use their example. We're going to use these examples right here. Right here. Negative 2x plus 5 is less than 9. Negative 2x plus 5 is less than 9. And 3y minus 7 is greater than 2. 3y minus 7 is greater than 2. So first thing first, we're going to put these equal, or not equal to, but in this case, we're going to put them with a 0. So we're going to move the numbers on this side of the equation across so that we end up with a 0 here. Negative 2x minus 4 plus 5 minus 9 is in minus 4. And then over here, we're going to subtract 2, 3y minus 9 is greater than 0. So a similar idea here. We see that the equation negative 2x plus 4 is less than 0, and this equation is greater than 0. So if this one is less than 0, and this one's greater than 0, then we also know that this one must be less than this one. And that's an important concept. So because 0 is in between those two numbers, then this one being less than 0 and this one being greater than 0 means we can say this. Negative 2x minus 4 is less than 3y minus 9. And so it's basically the same concept as what we did up here when we combine these equations. It's just that the inequality symbol is there instead of an equal sign. And so then all we have to do to solve it from here, again, we're putting it in standard form. So I'm going to subtract 3y from both sides. I get negative 2x minus 3y minus 4 is less than negative 9. We're going to add 4 to both sides. Negative 2x minus 3y, that cancels out, is less than negative 5. Now, if you wanted to, because it frankly, it looks a little ugly with all the negatives, we can multiply this entire equation by negative 1, and we would end up with 2x plus 3y and 5. And don't forget, whenever you multiply or divide by a negative number, it means that you have to switch the inequality symbol to be the other direction. And so this would be the final. Either one of these is fine. I'm just showing you what it looks like to kind of make it look a little more pretty, which is like to get rid of those negatives. So you might need to do that. And if you ever need to do that, don't forget to switch the inequality sign, right? So multiply by negative 1, switch the inequality symbol. All right, so that's pretty much it. That's what you're doing down here for numbers 8 and number 9. Same thing, put it to 0, then combine them and solve for standard form. And that's it for lesson 1.